Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd with
Chris Capello, not the internet's busiest music nerd, but I work for the internet's busiest music nerd.
Technically employed.
I make him less busy.
He makes me a little less busy, thankfully, and I appreciate it. This week I was talking with Chris about something I've kind of been musing about for a few days, partially because of a few things that had recently happened, or things that keep coming up in music. The most recent occurrence sort of being that Surfer Blood thing, where they were talking about how the frontman from the group, or I'd been reading on some websites, has been arrested for domestic abuse, and just sort of like was violent toward his girlfriend, from what I had been reading. And another coincidence is that the very night that I was doing my Xibalba review, the band is now kind of facing accusations online of sexual harassment. Of course, another example would be Chris Brown, who, of course, with his assault on Rihanna has kind of made him a black sheep in the music industry. And, of course, these are all like, male on female, sexual harassment, violence kind of issues, but I'm not necessarily talking about these issues simply. Basically, assholes in the music industry, assholes who make music, people who do, seedy stuff. How do you perceive them after kind of this stuff has come out to the public?
This kind of question ultimately comes down to whether we as music listeners should, have our opinions about an individual, the artist making music, inform our opinions of the music itself. And I think that in the case of people like Chris Brown, who are not just musicians, but actually occupy some sort of, place in the public eye as a celebrity figure,
and entertainer.
Right. They have more of an obligation to not act like an asshole if they expect that kind of, action or behavior to inform their fans or just everyone else who is watching them, their opinions of that individual. But with a guy like the guy from Surfer Blood, you're right that the reaction's probably going to be less intense because there isn't as much of a public eye on him. I would actually not be surprised really if the reaction against Surfer Blood's music in the future was definitely, if not entirely negative, at least negatively informed by the coverage that this incident has been getting.
Do you think we don't get a lot of coverage like that? I mean, you just talked about the drug abuse thing and it reminded me of Jay Retard. I mean, do you think that we don't see this kind of coverage all the time from major media outlets that cover music or just independent music because it's not really happening, or because indie bands are better at keeping it on the hush-hush, or there's just not really all that much money or interest in that kind of thing?
I mean, I think it's all about the angle that the websites are going for. I mean, music, especially independent music, tends to kind of glamorize, or at least the media that covers, independent music tends to glamorize the, sort of not necessarily the rock and roll lifestyle, but really the lifestyle of the tortured artist. I think drug abuse goes with that, and sometimes, general like asshole behavior can go with that. But one thing that really doesn't ever go with anything, and certainly doesn't make anyone seem like a sympathetic character, is, domestic abuse, or really murder. I mean, if we're going to talk about that as well. Which, those are both things that go well beyond, I think, the idea of what's considered asshole behavior as opposed to just like totally unacceptable behavior.
It's kind of like that other instance that occurred when Action Bronson saw some fire because of the water I guess him or a friend had spilled on someone that they thought was transsexual at the time, but I guess it just ended up being a woman. And I also want to say that also in the internet age you have a completely different thing to consider, because I mean, I guess in the just the television or radio age, it's the same. But in the internet age, I feel like things can snowball so much faster because a piece of information doesn't necessarily need to be leaked by a news organization who may or may not sort of strategically think of how to deliver it. You just may have some person that has a piece of information and throws it out there, whether or not they think it's 100% accurate. Sort of in the case of the Xibalba thing, where a lot of the accusations that pretty much all the accusations of sexual abuse being committed by them are just being done online. I saw a screenshot of like text messages on a phone, Tumblr posts from the person who is the alleged victim and from the band themselves, both very well written, but kind of also containing things in both of them that seem a little fishy. I kind of feel like the negative, and the hardcore scene is just known for stirring up such strong emotions in any direction.
Right.
It seems like how the reception is going to be depends on what piece of information is leaked first to people. Another situation of something seedy, but also the information that was first leaked to people kind of being in the opposite direction was that situation Lamb of God is going through right now, where the lead singer has been accused of murder while they were overseas on tour. And most of the reception over here has been pretty supportive toward the band from their fans.
This whole sort of predicament, especially when you're talking about negative things, bad things that artists do, it calls to mind actually a zine that I heard was being created online, I believe called the It's Complicated Project, in which a bunch of feminist writers are examining a lot of art that they believe is really great, but that they have problems with as feminists, right? That they think of as in some way misogynistic, right? And a lot of it is about music. And so I think that kind of questioning is an important thing to do, because even though I don't think it's good to discount art just because you have a problem with the person who's creating it, but I do think that it's important to recognize,
that there's some kind of philosophical disconnect between you and what you're listening to.
Exactly. I mean, I think it's important to recognize the creator of the art that you're talking about, that you're experiencing, because that can often give you insight into the ways in which you should appreciate it.
And that's another thing. It's like, what about music that you have a character, let's just say Kanye, because I think he's the biggest example. Somebody who, clearly has done asshole type things, like the Taylor Swift incident, which is, of course, probably the biggest. I mean, nothing heinous like what Chris Brown has done publicly, that was discussed in the public arena as far as we know. But the thing is, what about a guy like Kanye who clearly has done asshole things but makes music where he sort of acknowledges his asshole personality and just sort of sings about it, and I don't want to say glorifies it, but at least acknowledges it in his music and sort of to an extent makes songs about it, especially on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, where he's really kind of going into depth and discussing it at length.
Well, I think that Kanye is a really interesting example because he is really, like you said, kind of this quintessential example of assholes in music, a musical asshole who is unrelentingly an asshole. I mean, he is thoroughly an asshole, but he's so self-aware about it. And I mean, I think that to me is one of the reasons that My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is at least an important album, if not a great album, although I think it is a great album. It's this idea that you can make music that is so opulent and so grandiose and is about and so thoroughly expresses certain qualities of Kanye West's persona, and yet at the same time, lyrically, it kind of speaks to this awareness that what he's doing with his music is kind of obnoxious. I think of Barg from Burzum is another good example. I mean, he makes music that is, ideologically speaking, Burzum's music is pretty in line with a lot of the things that he does. I mean, burning churches, killing people, and does that mean that, that music and really black metal in general can't be enjoyed? I mean, by any people who care about, human rights and stuff? I mean, well, I think that ultimately that's for an individual to decide. How much should your philosophy influence the ways that you appreciate music?
Odd Future is another example of kids who rap about some pretty heinous shit sometimes, but they're not necessarily doing it. However, they're very kind of cocky and jerkish and unapologetic about it. And to an extent, I understand why. Nick Cave can sing about a very heinous, disgusting act, and it's sort of, artful and accepted. But
right.
When Tyler, the Creator, or, Earl or somebody like that raps about rape, they're assumed a rapist. you
Right.
know?
And I think that that's unfair and probably kind of racist. But at the same time, the way that they've responded to certain allegations about, that, actually a lot of the negative opinions about the Odd Future members are not informed really by the lyrical content, but more informed by the ways in which the people in the collective present themselves, and how they act on Twitter, and just the stupid things that they say occasionally. That to me constitutes obnoxious behavior and maybe even asshole behavior, but not terrible person behavior.
Another funny thing to mention is not only is this video going to last forever,
Yeah.
but sometimes that asshole behavior, despite the fact that people hate it and despise it and talk shit about it on the internet, it in fact helps them a lot of the time. I mean, especially in the case of Odd Future, especially in the case of, Jay Retard, who around the time when he put out Blood Visions was not that well known, and then when that whole debacle went down where he punched that guy in the face during a live show, like any and every semi-violent, live video of him was sort of like brought into context. He was like made famous almost overnight. And when I interviewed him, we were talking about it, and he was telling me like, literally like the next week, just from all the blog posts, tons of people were coming out to my shows. And then, the next tour, like less people were there because they knew that when they came out next time, there weren't going to be me punching people in the face. And like people would come out to my show and like provoke me and just like try to get me to punch them in the face. And the thing is like all that, I guess, attention on him also got people listening to his music and knowing full well that he is this dude who punched this other dude in the face for, reasons unknown to most of us because the video was so short.
Right.
His music appealed to a lot of people because, you had a lot of first-time listeners like, who's this dude punching people in the face? Let me listen. This is pretty catchy,
I'm gonna buy this record.
I'm gonna buy this record. So yes, there are a lot of people who do asshole stuff in music. There are a lot of people who just have asshole personalities in music, but I mean, in my opinion, I don't feel like that necessarily means you have to hate their music, And then that's basically it for me.
It's true. I mean, I think that, again, what it comes down to is how the individual's, personal beliefs and actions are expressed through their music. I mean, if the music itself promotes some sort of asshole message, then it suffers for it, in my opinion. I mean, one last example that I was actually thinking about a lot within this past week, I ended up seeing a punk band called Joyce Manor play at the Space, and this is my second time seeing them. And I wrote in advance of this second show, about their music and the certain qualities of their music that I feel tend to attract kind of obnoxious fans and just seem kind of obnoxious to me. And lo and behold, I went to the show and everyone was kind of obnoxious, and including the singer of the band. But to his credit, he was for the most part making fun of the kinds of people who were at the show, but it was just so unbelievably like obnoxious. I mean, these kids are like, moshing or whatever, and they're doing their thing. It's a normal punk show, and Barry from Joyce Manor looks down at these kids and he goes, "Oh, so this is your first show, huh?" And I was just like, oh my god, like
it's kind of a jerk thing to say.
He sounds like me, like watching that happen, but he's on stage and it's his band and it's his music, and the band has some sort of responsibility for the kinds of people who come out to their shows.
Some musicians, you never really know they're assholes or have asshole personalities or tendencies until you see them live. Again, what do you guys think? Assholes in music, making asshole music, doing asshole things. People who are not assholes, sing about asshole things. The whole kit and caboodle. What are your thoughts? Should it impact how you feel about records, songs, melodies, lyrics? Should it? In a good way? In a bad way? Let me know. Anthony Fantano.
Chris Capello.
Assholes.
Assholes.
Forever.